Asterisk, asterisk, Part 1. The Broken Bridge and the Survivor. Asterisk, asterisk. The mountain night pressed down like a wet wool blanket, heavy with mist that turned the pine trees into ghosts. Martha Sawyer clutched the oilcloth-wrapped ledger against her chest as the stagecoach wheels screamed against loose gravel. Behind them, hoofbeats thundered through the darkness. 3 riders, maybe 4, closing fast. "Hold tight," the driver bellowed, whipping the horses into a desperate gallop. Martha braced herself between the wooden seats, her knuckles white around the ledger. The other passengers, a mining clerk and his wife, prayed aloud as the coach lurched sideways, teetering on 2 wheels before slamming back down. The bridge appeared through the mist like a promise of salvation. Pine Creek Bridge, the driver had called it earlier. The last crossing before Silver Bend. But as they thundered onto the weathered planks, Martha heard the sickening crack of rotting wood. Time slowed. The front wheels broke through first, pitching the coach forward. Martha saw the mining clerk's wife thrown against the door, saw it burst open, saw the dark water rushing below. Then everything tilted, and she was falling through air thick with screams and splintering wood. The creek hit her like a frozen fist. Current dragged her under, tumbling her against rocks that tore at her traveling dress. Her lungs burned, but she kept the ledger pressed tight even as the water tried to rip it away. This book was worth more than her life. It held proof of crimes that reached from Denver to Kansas City, names and numbers that could bring down powerful men. She broke the surface, gasping, caught a glimpse of the coach's lantern disappearing beneath black water. Then the current swept her around a bend. A fallen log loomed ahead. She grabbed it, hauling herself partway out of the icy flow. "Help!" Her voice came out as a croak. "Anyone?" Only the creek answered, rushing past with indifferent violence. Martha dragged herself onto the muddy bank, teeth chattering so hard she thought they might crack. The ledger was still there, wrapped in oilcloth her sister Elizabeth had prepared with such care. Elizabeth, who was supposed to be on this journey. Elizabeth, who lay in a Denver cemetery because she'd asked too many questions about Reed Montgomery's banking operations. 3 days, that's how long Martha wandered the mountain paths, following the creek downstream, living on pine nuts and creek water, sleeping under fallen logs. Her fine traveling dress became a mud-caked rag. Her boots fell apart. By the time she stumbled into Silver Bend's main street, she looked more ghost than woman. The town materialized through morning fog, a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the mountain's base. The Grand Hotel's painted sign creaked in the wind. Murphy's General Store hadn't opened yet. A few early risers stopped to stare at the bedraggled woman weaving between the horse posts. "Ma'am?" A boy in patched overalls approached cautiously. "You need help?" Martha tried to answer, but her throat wouldn't work. The world tilted, and she caught herself against a hitching post. The boy ran off shouting for his mother. By noon, she'd recovered enough to seek lodging. The Grand Hotel wanted $2 a night, might as well have asked for the moon. The Silverhorn boarding house looked more promising, its weathered exterior suggesting modest rates. Martha climbed the front steps, practicing her story. She was a seamstress seeking work. The coach accident was just bad luck. No one needed to know about the ledger hidden beneath her corset. $12 for the month, paid in advance. Victor Harlow, the proprietor, barely glanced up from his newspaper. No visitors after 8. No cooking in the rooms. No. "I have it." Martha counted out the bills with shaking hands. Her entire remaining fortune. "Might I see the room?" Harlow grunted and handed her a receipt. "Number 6, 2nd floor. Breakfast at 7. Supper at 6. You miss it, you go hungry." Room 6 was small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and window overlooking the alley. Martha sank onto the bed, finally allowing exhaustion to claim her. Tomorrow she'd find work. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to get the ledger to someone who could use it. Tonight, she just needed to disappear. A knock jolted her awake. Darkness had fallen. She'd slept the day away. Miss Sawyer, a young man's voice, smooth as honey. Garrett Drake, from downstairs. Mr. Harlow asked me to check on you, seeing as you missed supper. Martha opened the door a crack. Drake stood in the hallway, well-dressed and smiling. Too well-dressed for a boarding house resident. That's kind, but I'm fine. Least let me bring you some bread and milk. Hate to see a lady go hungry. His smile widened. No charge. Against her better judgment, Martha accepted. Drake returned with a tray, chattering about the town, the mining prospects, the difficulty of finding decent lodging. Actually, he said, setting down the tray, I might be able to help with that. My uncle owns a cottage just outside town, much nicer than here, and only $8 monthly. He's looking for a respectable tenant. $8. Martha's heart jumped. That would save precious money for food. I could show you the paperwork now, if you like. Get you moved in tomorrow. He produced official-looking documents. Martha squinted in the lamplight, trying to focus her exhausted mind on the small print. It all looked legitimate transfer of payment, rental agreement, even a proper receipt. I'll need the $12 to give my uncle. Then I'll bring you back 4 as change. Something flickered in his eyes, but Martha was too tired, too desperate to question it. She handed over her rent money. Drake pocketed it with another bright smile. Perfect. I'll arrange everything with my uncle tonight. Meet me at the corner of Main and Pine tomorrow morning. 8 sharp. I'll take you to the cottage. After he left, Martha lay back on the narrow bed, unease creeping through her exhaustion. But she'd seen the papers, held the receipt. Tomorrow she'd have better lodging and money left for food. She had to trust something. Morning came gray and drizzling. Martha waited at Main and Pine until her feet went numb. 8 o'clock became 9, became 10. No Drake. When she finally returned to the boarding house, Victor Harlow was sweeping the front steps. Mr. Harlow, have you seen Garrett Drake this morning? Who? Garrett Drake. He lives here. Gave me a receipt for... She showed him the paper. Harlow's face darkened. This is forged. Miss, that ain't my signature, and I don't know any Drake. He examined the paper closer. Someone's been playing you for a fool. The truth hit like creek water all over again. $12 gone. No cottage, no refund, no recourse. Martha stood in the drizzle, receipt crumbling in her fist, wondering if the creek might have been kinder after all. You still got a room here? Harlow's voice gentled slightly. No. He took the rent money to give his uncle. Damn fool girl. But there was pity in it. Look, I got an attic room. Leak in the corner. Door sticks something awful. $3 monthly if you can stand it. $3. Martha had $2.60. I'm a seamstress, she said quickly. I could mend. Don't need mending. You know how to cook. Yes. Mountain View Cafe needs a cook. Owner's particular about hiring, but... He studied her mud-stained dress, her desperate eyes. Tell Harold Calhoun that Victor sent you. Might could help. The attic room was everything Harlow promised, cramped, cold, with a door that stuck so bad she had to shoulder it open. But it was shelter. Martha set her few belongings on the crooked dresser, carefully hiding the ledger beneath loose floorboards. A sound from the room next door made her freeze footsteps, heavy and deliberate. The walls were thin. She could hear every creaking board. You best keep quiet over there. The voice came through the wall, deep and unfriendly. Don't need any trouble. Martha said nothing, pressing against her stuck door. You hear me? Yes, she managed. Good. The footsteps retreated. Martha slumped against the door, wondering what kind of man lived beyond that thin wall. Someone who valued quiet, someone who didn't want trouble. That made 2 of them. She'd survived the creek, survived the mountains, survived being swindled. Tomorrow she'd walk into the Mountain View Cafe and convince Harold Calhoun she could cook. She'd earn enough to eat, to live, to wait for the right moment to deliver justice for Elizabeth. The ledger waited beneath the floorboards, patient as winter. Outside, Silver Bend settled into evening, unaware that a seamstress turned cook had arrived at the frontier carrying secrets that could shake foundations from here to Kansas City. But first, she had to survive, and that meant facing whatever harsh realities and harsh neighbors this frontier town would throw at her. Part 2, Seamstress turned cook, faced a harsh cowboy next door. Martha woke to the sound of her door refusing to budge. Again, she pressed her shoulder against the warped wood, shoving hard. The door flew open so suddenly she stumbled into the hallway, directly into a solid wall of man. "Watch it!" The voice belonged to her neighbor, the one who'd warned her about keeping quiet. He steadied her with one hand, his touch brief and impersonal. This close. She could see the scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, the weathered lines around gray eyes that belonged on an older man. He couldn't be past 30. "I'm sorry, the door—" "Sticks, I know." He stepped aside, but not before she caught the smell of leather and pine soap. "You might try lifting while you push." Martha straightened her patched dress, acutely aware of how she must look after days of travel and disaster. "Thank you, Mr. Westlake." He touched his hat brim, already moving toward the stairs. "Ethan Westlake." She watched him go, noting the slight favor of his right leg, the way he held the banister. A working man. From his worn boots and canvas pants, the kind who'd earned his scars. Downstairs in the boarding house dining room, conversation stopped when she entered. 5 other boarders sat around the long table, 2 minors, a telegraph operator, an elderly woman, and a young man she recognized with a start. Garrett Drake. He sat at the far end, calmly buttering his biscuit. Martha's hands clenched. Before she could speak, Mrs. Morrison, the elderly woman, patted the bench beside her. "You must be the new girl. Sit here, dear. Don't mind the men gawking. They haven't seen a young woman in weeks." Martha sat stiffly, eyes locked on Drake. He smiled at her, pleasant as Sunday morning. "Miss Sawyer, isn't it? Feeling better today. You looked quite done in yesterday." The sheer gall of it stole her breath. Around the table, the other boarders continued eating, oblivious. "Mr. Drake," her voice came out steady, controlled. "About that cottage." "What cottage?" He tilted his head. "All innocence." "The one you took $12 for, your uncle's cottage." Drake's brow furrowed in perfect confusion. "I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else. Miss, I don't have an uncle in Silver Bend. You came to my room. You showed me papers. Now that's a serious accusation." His voice hardened slightly. "I spent yesterday at the mine. Ask anyone." The telegraph operator nodded. "True enough. Saw him heading out at dawn." Martha looked around the table, seeing skepticism in every face except Mrs. Morrison's, of course. A stranger's word against an established resident. She knew how this would play. "Perhaps you dreamed it, dear." "Mrs. Morrison suggested gently. "The mountain air can play tricks when you're exhausted." Martha bit back her response. Making a scene would only hurt her chances of finding work. She needed this town's acceptance more than she needed $12 back. For now. After breakfast, she headed to the Mountain View Cafe. The smell of bacon and coffee drew her like a beacon. Inside, a handful of customers hunched over their plates while a harried woman rushed between tables. "Mr. Calhoun?" Martha asked. "In the kitchen? Through there." The woman jerked her head toward swinging doors. Harold Calhoun stood over a smoking stove, cursing creatively. He was a big man gone to fat, sweat staining his shirt despite the morning chill. When he saw Martha, his scowl deepened. "We're not hiring. Victor Harlow sent me." That gave him pause. "You the one got swindled?" Heat flooded Martha's cheeks. Word travels fast. Honey, in Silver Bend, gossip moves faster than wildfire. He studied her. Are you really a cook? I kept house for my sister's family. Fed 8 people 3 meals a day. This ain't no family kitchen. Miners want quantity, not doilies and tea cakes. Martha bristled. I can cook beef and beans as well as anyone, better than whatever's burning on that stove. Calhoun glanced at the smoking pan and cursed again. My cook quit yesterday. Ran off with some prospector. He yanked the pan off the heat. Tell you what, cook lunch today. If the men don't complain, you got a job. $1 a day plus meals. $1 a day. Enough to survive? Barely. Martha rolled up her sleeves. What supplies do I have? By noon, the cafe was packed. Martha had found her rhythm beef stew from the tough meat, biscuits from the weevily flour, even a passable pie from dried apples. She moved between stove and counter like she'd been born to it, ignoring the ache in her feet and back. Not bad. Ethan Westlake stood at the counter, hat in hand, up close in daylight. She could see his eyes were more storm than gray. Better than Charlie's ever was. Thank you. She set down his coffee, proud that her hand stayed steady. You're the seamstress turned cook. It wasn't a question. Martha felt heat climb her neck. News does travel. Woman shows up half drowned, gets swindled her first day, then takes over the cafe kitchen. His mouth quirked slightly. That's worth talking about. I suppose everyone finds it amusing. Not amusing. He left coins on the counter. Exact change plus a penny. Impressive. After he left, Mrs. Morrison appeared at Martha's elbow. That one's trouble, she said quietly. Mr. Westlake. Works as foreman out at Silverhorn Ranch. Keeps to himself. Doesn't drink. Doesn't gamble. Doesn't visit the entertainment establishments. A man with that many dozens is hiding something. Martha thought of her own hidden ledger. Perhaps he just values his privacy. Privacy. Mrs. Morrison sniffed. That's what folks called it when his partner died 5 years back. Suspicious circumstances. Though nothing proven, you be careful around him. That evening, Martha climbed the narrow stairs to her attic room, exhausted but employed. The door stuck as usual. She was lifting and shoving when it suddenly gave way, spilling her into the room. On her narrow bed sat a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. Her heart hammered. After Drake's trick, she trusted nothing, but curiosity won. Inside the paper, she found a loaf of fresh bread and a small crock of butter. No note, no explanation. She looked at the thin wall separating her from Westlake's room, then at the bread, still warm. The next days fell into rhythm. Dawn at the cafe, cooking until her arms ached. Afternoons mending her few clothes and studying the ledger, memorizing names and numbers. Evenings listening to life through thin walls, Westlake's heavy tread. His occasional cough, the scrape of a chair. Sometimes she heard him talking low, and once she could have sworn he said a woman's name, Sarah. The bread appeared twice more. Never when she was there. Always when she needed it most. She wanted to thank him, but couldn't figure out how without admitting she suspected the source. Then came the morning Eleanor Wyatt walked into the cafe. She wasn't like the other women Martha had glimpsed in Silver Bend, the haggard miners' wives, or the painted ladies from the saloon district. Eleanor wore simple gray wool, but she carried herself like a queen. Mid-40s, Martha guessed, with silver threading her dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Miss Sawyer, I'm Eleanor Wyatt. I run the orphanage outside town. Martha set down coffee. How can I help you? I heard about your difficulties. The swindle. Martha's shoulders tightened. That's past. Is it because Garrett Drake is still operating? He's taken 3 others this month. I have no proof. He denied everything. Eleanor smiled thinly. Men like Drake always do, but there are ways to handle such matters that don't require proof. Just courage. She slid a card across the counter. "If you're interested in justice, real justice, come see me." The door chimed, and Frank Blackwood entered, filling the doorway like a thundercloud. Martha had seen him once before, riding past in an expensive carriage. He owned the largest ranch in the territory, controlled the water rights, had the sheriff in his pocket or so gossip claimed. "Miss Wyatt." His voice was smooth as oil, still tilting at windmills. "Mr. Blackwood, still squeezing the life from this town." He smiled, all teeth. "I prefer to think of it as maintaining order." His gaze swept over Martha, dismissive. "New blood, I see." "Martha Sawyer," Eleanor said firmly. "An excellent cook and seamstress." Seamstress turned cook arrived at the frontier seeking work. Blackwood tasted the words like wine. "But faced a harsh cowboy next door. I hear, how poetic." Martha felt her cheeks burn. The phrase would be all over town by sunset. After they left Eleanor with a meaningful look, Blackwood trailing cigar smoke, Martha gripped the counter until her knuckles went white. This town was too small, too connected, everyone watching, everyone talking. How long before someone started asking the right questions, before Reed Montgomery's people traced the missing ledger here? That night, she found more than bread outside her door. A small cloth bundle held a needle, thread, and a note. "For your mending, E.W." Not Eleanor Wyatt. The handwriting was too rough. Martha stared at the wall between her room and Westlake's. A harsh cowboy who left bread and sewing supplies, who worked for Silverhorn Ranch but didn't socialize, who mentioned a woman's name in his sleep. She used the needle to reinforce the hiding place for her ledger, stitching oilcloth to the underside of loose floorboards. As she worked, she heard Westlake's footsteps pause outside her door. A long silence. Then his door closed, and she was left wondering what kind of man performed secret kindnesses for a stranger who'd literally stumbled into him. The bell from the orphanage rang across town, calling the children to supper. Martha touched the card Eleanor had left. Justice, the woman had said, but justice for whom? For the swindled, for the orphans, for women with secrets wrapped in oilcloth, or for harsh cowboys with scars and ghosts named Sarah. Tomorrow she'd visit the orphanage. Tonight, she had bread, butter, and employment. In a frontier town where seamstresses became cooks, and nothing was quite what it seemed. That counted as victory. Through the wall, she heard Westlake's chair creak, heard him sigh like a man carrying stones. Martha pressed her palm against the rough wood between them. A silent thank you he'd never acknowledge. Somewhere in Silver Bend, Garrett Drake was choosing his next mark. Frank Blackwood was counting his money. And Eleanor Wyatt was planning something that required courage more than proof. Martha touched the hidden ledger. Soon, she thought, but first, she needed allies. Even harsh ones who left bread in the darkness and pretended not to care. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 3. Dinner. Schemes and the forged receipt. Asterisk. Asterisk. Martha watched from the cafe window as Garrett Drake worked his charm on another newcomer, a young man fresh off the stage. Still dusty from travel? Same smile, same friendly concern, same helpful suggestions about affordable lodging. Her hands clenched around the coffee pot. "You're going to break that." Ethan Westlake stood at the counter, having entered silent as shadow. "He's doing it again." Martha set down the pot carefully. "Right there in broad daylight." Ethan followed her gaze. "The Hutchinson boy. Just arrived from Ohio." "You know him." "Know of him. Coming to work his uncle's claim." He accepted the coffee she poured. Drake always did have a nose for opportunity. Someone should warn him. Someone should. But Ethan made no move to leave. Martha untied her apron. "Mr. Calhoun, I need 5 minutes." "Make it quick," the owner called from the kitchen. She hurried outside, but Drake and his mark had vanished. Martha stood in the muddy street. frustration burning in her chest. Another innocent about to lose everything, and she could do nothing without proof. "Looking for someone," Drake's voice came from behind her. Martha spun. He leaned against the general store wall. Alone now. Still wearing that infuriating smile. "Where's the young man you were talking to?" "What young man?" His eyes glinted with amusement. "Really, Miss Sawyer, this obsession is becoming unseemly. Perhaps you should focus on your cooking. You're a thief. Prove it." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "You can't, can you? Because I'm careful, and you're just a desperate woman with a wild story." He touched his hat brim mockingly. "Good day, Miss—" Martha returned to find Ethan still at the counter. "Lost him. He's too smooth, too practiced." She tied her apron with jerky movements. "There has to be a way." Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying his coffee. "Meet me at the boarding house after supper. Bring writing materials." "Why?" "Just be there." He left his usual coins and departed. That evening, Martha climbed to her room to find Ethan's door open. He sat at a small table, papers spread before him. The room was sparse but clean, a narrow bed, one chair, a trunk, no photographs, no personal touches except a child's wooden horse on the windowsill. "Sit." He gestured to the bed. "You want to stop Drake, we need to think like him. I don't like swindlers. Bad for the town's reputation. Bad for business." He pushed a paper toward her. "Write what you remember. Exactly what he said, what papers he showed you." For an hour they worked, reconstructing Drake's approach. Ethan asked detailed questions. What color was the ink? Did the paper have a watermark? What specific words did he use? He mentioned his uncle owned property. That's checkable. Ethan made notes. The receipt had an official seal. That's forgeable but traceable. He operates openly, which means he's not worried about consequences. Because no one believes his victims. Or because he has protection. Ethan leaned back. Drake's been here 6 months, never seems to work, always has money. Either he's got a stake or someone's funding him. Martha thought of Frank Blackwood's oily smile. Someone who benefits from desperate people. Now you're thinking. Ethan stood, favoring his right leg. "I'll ask around at the ranch. You keep watching, but don't confront him alone again." "Concerned about me, Mr. Westlake?" He paused at the door. "Concerned about my neighbor keeping quiet? Corpses are notoriously loud." Despite the morbid words, Martha caught something else in his tone. The same careful distance that left bread at her door but never acknowledged it. 2 days later, Eleanor Wyatt appeared at the cafe during the afternoon lull. "I heard you've been asking questions about our friend Mr. Drake." Martha glanced around the empty room. "He's still operating." "Of course he is. Men like that always do, until someone stops them." Eleanor accepted tea. "I have a proposition. There's a wealthy widow arriving next week from Boston. Or rather, there will appear to be one." "I don't understand." "Drake targets newcomers, so we give him an irresistible target." Eleanor's smile was sharp. "You were a seamstress. Can you still play the part of a lady?" Martha thought of her waterlogged traveling dress, her work-rough hands. Possibly, but I have nothing suitable to wear." "Leave that to me. The question is, do you have the courage?" Before Martha could answer, Ethan entered. He took in Eleanor's presence and Martha's expression in one glance. Miss Wyatt, plotting revolution again. "Mr. Westlake, still pretending you don't care about this town?" They faced each other like old adversaries who'd found respect through conflict. Ethan took his usual seat at the counter. "If you're planning what I think you're planning, you'll need more than courage. Drake's not stupid." "No," Eleanor agreed. "Which is why Miss Sawyer won't be alone." Martha looked between them. "You know each other." Everyone knows everyone in Silver Bend. Ethan said, "Some of us just choose our associations more carefully." Eleanor snorted. "Says the man who hermits in his room when he's not working himself to death at Silverhorn." Better than tilting at every windmill that spins past. Despite their sparring, Martha sensed an undercurrent of understanding. These two had history, not romantic, but something deeper, shared battles, perhaps, or shared losses. "I'll do it," Martha said. "Whatever you're planning." Eleanor's approval was a warm thing. "Good. Come to the orphanage tomorrow. Bring Mr. Westlake if he can spare the time from his hermitage." After she left, Ethan shook his head. "That woman's going to get someone hurt one day." "She's trying to help. She's trying to save the world one lost soul at a time." He paused. "Been trying for years, ever since—" He cut himself off. "Since what?" "Not my story to tell." He stood to leave, then turned back. "That wooden horse in my room, you probably noticed it." Martha nodded. "My sister made it. She was 10. His voice roughened. "If you do this thing with Eleanor, be careful. Drake might be small game, but small game can still bite." The next afternoon found Martha at the orphanage, a sprawling building that had once been a mining company barracks. Children's voices echoed from within. Not the sad, subdued sounds she'd expected, but laughter and argument and life. Eleanor led her to a private room where a stunning dress lay spread on the bed, deep blue silk with jet buttons. Fashionable but not ostentatious. Beside it sat matching boots, gloves, and a small hat with a net veil. It belonged to a benefactor. Eleanor explained. She'd approve of its use. As Martha touched the silk, Sophia Warner entered. The town seamstress was a small, bird-like woman with clever fingers and knowing eyes. "So you're our Boston widow." Sophia circled Martha, measuring with her gaze. "We'll need to take it in here. Let it out there. Can you do an Eastern accent?" "I lived in Boston 2 years," Martha demonstrated. "My late husband left me quite comfortable, though I do find the management of funds so tiresome." Sophia clapped. "Perfect helpless, but not stupid. Drake won't be able to resist." Over the next hour, they refined the plan. Martha would arrive on the evening stage as Mrs. Catherine Hartwell, seeking investment opportunities in the West. She'd take a room at the Grand Hotel. Eleanor would cover the cost and make sure Drake heard about her situation. "But how do we prove he's swindling?" Martha asked. "Even if he takes the bait, it's still my word against his." Eleanor smiled. "That's where Mr. Westlake's contribution comes in. Ethan?" Martha hadn't heard him arrive, but there he stood in the doorway, holding a leather folder. Drake uses the same forged documents each time, just changes the names. He opened the folder to reveal several receipts. "I've been collecting stories from his victims. The watermark, the seal placement, even the signature style, all identical. So we let him give Mrs. Hartwell his forged papers," Eleanor said. "Then prove they match the others." "It's not enough," Ethan said. "We need to catch him with the originals, the blank documents he uses as templates." "How?" "I have an idea about that." He glanced at Martha. "But it means taking a bigger risk. After Drake makes his pitch, Mrs. Hartwell needs to insist on seeing the property immediately. Get him away from town long enough to search his room." "Breaking and entering," Sophia looked delighted. "Investigation of suspected criminal activity," Eleanor corrected. "I'm sure Sheriff Davis would understand, given proper evidence." Martha felt the plan taking shape around her like a garment being fitted, dangerous but necessary. "When do we start?" 3 days, Eleanor said. "Enough time to spread word about the wealthy widow's arrival, not enough for Drake to get suspicious." That night, Martha practiced her role in front of her small mirror. The Boston accent came back easily, but the mannerisms of wealth took more effort. She'd been poor too long, moved like someone who expected to work. Ethan knocked and entered at her invitation, watching her attempts with a critical eye. "You're trying too hard. Rich women don't think about how they move, they just expect the world to accommodate them." "Easy for you to say." He surprised her by demonstrating straightening his spine, lifting his chin, moving with a carelessly confident grace that transformed him. For a moment, she saw not a scarred ranch foreman, but someone who'd known different rooms. "Where did you learn that?" The mask dropped. "Before I came west, another life." He moved to leave, then paused. "Drake keeps his important papers in a hidden compartment in his trunk, left side, false bottom. Don't ask how I know." "Ethan," she stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Why are you helping really?" He looked at her hand, then her face. Something shifted in those storm-gray eyes, a flash of heat quickly banked. "Maybe I don't like seeing innocent people hurt. Maybe I think this town deserves better than parasites and their protectors." He gently removed her hand. "Or maybe I just want my neighbor to stay quiet and alive. Hard to sleep with corpses next door." But his thumb brushed her knuckles before he let go, and Martha felt that touch like a brand all through the night. 3 days later, Mrs. Catherine Hartwell arrived on the evening stage, elegant in blue silk and practiced grief. The game was set. Drake would take the bait. She was certain. What she wasn't certain about was the way Ethan had looked at her like a man seeing something he wanted but couldn't afford to take. ***, Part 4. The Orphanage and Old Secrets. ***. The morning after Drake's capture, Martha walked to the orphanage, needing distance from the town's excited gossip. The building sat on a hill overlooking Silver Bend, its weathered boards painted cheerful yellow Eleanor's doing. No doubt. Children's voices carried on the wind, mixing with the distant clang of mining equipment. Martha found Eleanor in the garden, teaching a group of young girls to tend vegetables. The woman looked up with a knowing smile. "Our heroine arrives. The children have been asking about the lady who caught the bad man." "I didn't catch anyone. We all did." "Modesty doesn't suit you." Eleanor stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. "Come, there's someone you should meet." They walked through the orphanage, past rooms filled with narrow beds and carefully mended toys. The place smelled of lye soap and bread clean, if worn. Eleanor stopped at a door marked Library. Inside, a girl of perhaps 12 sat reading to younger children. She had wheat-colored hair and gray eyes that seemed familiar. When she looked up, Martha's breath caught. Those eyes storm-gray, careful, guarded were Ethan's eyes in a child's face. "Sarah, this is Miss Sawyer. Martha, meet Sarah Westlake." The girl stood politely. "Ma'am." "I thought—" Martha stopped, confused. "Ethan's sister." "The very same." Eleanor guided Martha to a corner where they could talk quietly. "Not dead, as the town believes. Not taken, as Ethan fears. Hidden." "I don't understand." Eleanor glanced at Sarah, who had returned to reading. 10 years ago, Frank Blackwood decided he wanted the Westlake homestead. Good water, better grazing. When their parents died of fever, Ethan was 20, Sarah only 8. Blackwood offered to buy. Ethan refused. Martha could see where this was going. So Blackwood took what he wanted anyway. Fire. Middle of the night. Ethan was in town, getting medicine for Sarah. She'd caught the fever too. When he returned, the house was ashes. No sign of his sister. Everyone assumed she'd died in the fire. But she didn't. I found her 2 days later, wandering the hills, scared, smoke-sick, but alive. She'd escaped through a root cellar. Eleanor's face hardened. She also saw who set the fire. Blackwood's men, including Jenkins. Why didn't you tell Ethan? Because a grief-stricken 20-year-old would have gotten himself killed trying for revenge. And because Sarah begged me not to. She was terrified Blackwood would come back to finish the job. Eleanor sighed. So I hid her, let everyone believe she died. kept Ethan at arm's length so he wouldn't guess. Martha watched Sarah with the younger children, patient and gentle. 10 years of thinking she's dead, that's cruel. Crueler than letting Blackwood kill them both, I made a choice. Maybe the wrong one. But it kept her safe. Why tell me now? Eleanor met her eyes directly. Because things are changing. Drake's arrest has Blackwood nervous. He's planning something my sources in town are sure of it. And because I see how Ethan looks at you. Heat crept up Martha's neck. We're neighbors, allies against Drake. My dear, I've known Ethan Westlake for 10 years. He's never looked at anyone the way he looks at you, like a man remembering he's alive. Before Martha could respond, Sarah approached. Miss Wyatt Timothy's asking for the next chapter. Of course. Eleanor touched Martha's arm. Think about what I've said. Sarah can't hide forever, and Ethan deserves the truth. But it has to come at the right time, in the right way. Martha spent an hour at the orphanage, helping with lunch, learning the rhythms of the place. Sarah stayed near, curious but cautious. When Martha mentioned she was a seamstress, the girl's eyes lit up. Could you teach me? Miss Wyatt tries, but she says her fingers are too clumsy. I'd be happy to. Martha found herself smiling at the girl's eagerness. Does Miss Wyatt let you come to town? Never. Sarah's face fell. Too dangerous. She says someone might recognize me. After 10 years. She worries. Sarah glanced around, then leaned closer. I dream about him sometimes. Ethan, is he okay? Martha thought of the man who left bread at her door, who'd helped catch Drake not for glory, but for justice. He misses you, every day. Tears welled in the girl's eyes. I miss him too, but Miss Wyatt says... Miss Wyatt wants to protect you both? Martha squeezed her shoulder. Sometimes protection becomes its own kind of prison. Walking back to town, Martha's mind churned. The ledger hidden in her room contained evidence against Reed Montgomery. But what good was evidence if she couldn't get it to the right authorities? And now this, a sister hidden, a brother grieving, a powerful man who burned children out of their homes. She found Ethan at the cafe, finishing a late lunch. He looked tired, dust from the ranch still on his clothes. Heard you visited the orphanage, he said. Eleanor wanted to thank me for the Drake business. Not quite a lie. How is the old crusader? Martha chose her words carefully. She carries a lot of secrets, burdens. Don't we all? He pushed his empty plate away. There's something you should know. Word came from the telegraph office Frank Blackwood's called a meeting. Tomorrow night. His hunting cabin up Pine Ridge. Select invitations only. What kind of meeting? The kind where powerful men make plans away from witnesses. Ethan's jaw tightened. One of the ranch hands overheard Jenkins talking. Something about new acquisitions and expanding operations. Martha felt cold. You think he's planning something? I know he is. Question is what? He stood, favoring his leg more than usual. Weather's changing. Storm coming in. Might be a good night to stay indoors. Keep those doors locked. After he left, Martha helped with the dinner rush, but her mind kept circling back to Sarah. The girl had Ethan's eyes, his careful way of moving, even his slight smile. How had no one noticed? But then, who would look for a dead girl in an orphanage? That evening, she sat in her room, mending a torn apron and thinking. Through the wall, she heard Ethan moving about, the creak of his chair, the scratch of a pencil. Writing, planning. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find a small package on the floor, brown paper tied with string. Inside, a red wool scarf, soft and bright as hope. Thank you, she said to the wall between them. Silence. Then, muffled, don't know what you mean. She smiled, wrapping the scarf around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of pine and leather. Through her small window, She could see storm clouds building over the mountains. Tomorrow, Blackwood would hold his meeting. Soon, she'd have to decide what to do about the ledger, about Reed Montgomery, about the truth of her own past. But tonight, she had a warm scarf and the sound of Ethan's presence beyond the wall. She pulled out paper and began composing a letter she might never send to the federal marshals, to anyone who might care about corruption spreading like poison through the territories. Halfway through, she stopped. Elizabeth had written letters too, had gathered evidence, spoken truth, and Elizabeth lay in a Denver cemetery. No, if she was going to fight, it wouldn't be with letters that could be intercepted, ignored, or used to track her down. It would be here, in Silver Bend, with allies who left bread and scarves and who carried their own hidden griefs. She folded the half-written letter and tucked it with the ledger. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to get closer to Blackwood's operation. Tonight, she had a red scarf and the steady sound of Ethan's breathing through the wall, a lullaby for the lost and hiding. In the orphanage on the hill, Sarah Westlake was probably dreaming of a brother she couldn't claim. In his room, that brother kept vigil with memories and a wooden horse, and Martha sat between them, holding secrets that could heal or destroy, wondering if courage meant revealing truth or keeping silence. The storm broke near midnight, rain hammering the roof. Martha lay awake, thinking of fires and lost children and the kind of men who burned families for land, thinking of Blackwood's meeting and what new acquisitions might mean. Through the wall, she heard Ethan get up, pace to the window, looking for ghosts, perhaps, or just watching the rain wash the dust from Silver Bend's secrets. "She's alive," Martha whispered, too soft for him to hear. "She's alive and she misses you." Lightning illuminated her room, throwing shadows that looked like reaching hands. In the morning, she'd go back to cooking, to watching, to pretending she didn't know that the most dangerous secrets were the ones we kept to protect the people we loved. But first, she pulled the red scarf tighter and let the storm sing her to sleep, dreaming of reunions and truth and the courage to know which moment demanded which choice. **, Part 5. Night on the Mountain and Three Shadows in Lamplight. **. The storm had passed, leaving the mountain path slick with mud and treacherous with loose stones. Martha pulled the red scarf tighter as she watched Ethan saddle his horse in the pre-dawn darkness behind the boarding house. "You're really going alone," she kept her voice low, aware of sleeping boarders. "It's just reconnaissance. Need to know what Blackwood's planning." He checked his rifle, movements efficient despite the poor light. "I'll be back by morning. And if you're not..." He paused, looking at her directly. "Then you tell Eleanor everything you know and get out of Silver Bend. I'm not running." "You will if you're smart." He swung into the saddle. "Bar your door tonight. Trust no one." But as he turned his horse toward the mountain, Martha made a decision. She hurried to her room, changed into her darkest dress and sturdy boots, then knocked on Eleanor's door at the orphanage just as sunrise painted the sky pink. "He's gone to spy on Blackwood's meeting," Martha said without preamble. Eleanor, still in her wrapper, nodded grimly. "Alone?" "Yes." "Stubborn fool. He'll get himself killed." Eleanor moved to her wardrobe. "Sarah, come here." The girl appeared from an adjoining room, already dressed, in the early light. Her resemblance to Ethan was even more pronounced. "He's going after Blackwood," Eleanor told her gently. "We need to..." "I heard," Sarah's chin lifted, pure Westlake stubbornness. "I'm going with you." "Absolutely not." "He's my brother?" The words burst out, 10 years of separation in them. "I won't hide anymore while he's in danger." Eleanor and Martha exchanged glances. Finally. Eleanor sighed. "You follow every order exactly. One sign of trouble, you run back here." An hour later, 3 riders made their way up Pine Ridge, Eleanor on her steady mare, Martha on a borrowed mount, and Sarah On a small pinto that knew the mountain paths, they followed Ethan's tracks in the mud, careful to stay well back. The hunting cabin sat in a natural bowl of rock, surrounded by pine and aspen. Smoke curled from the chimney. Martha counted 6 horses in the lean-to, including Ethan's bay. Her heart sank. He was already inside, or... There! Eleanor pointed to a cluster of boulders above the cabin. A slight movement betrayed Ethan's position. They picketed their horses well back and approached on foot, Sarah moving silent as a ghost despite her excitement. Ethan heard them coming. Martha saw his hand go to his gun before recognizing them. His expression went from relief to fury in seconds. "What the hell?" "Language," Eleanor murmured. "There are children present." Ethan's gaze locked on Sarah, and Martha watched his face cycle through disbelief, hope, and dawning recognition. "Sarah!" The word came out cracked. The girl flew into his arms. "Ethan?" "Shh." He held her tight but kept his voice low. "How, Eleanor?" "What?" "Explanations later," Eleanor said. "What have you seen?" Ethan kept one arm around Sarah as if afraid she'd disappear. "Blackwood, Jenkins, Sullivan from the telegraph office. 3 men I don't recognize. They've been talking about shipments coming through, not cattle or mining supplies." His jaw tightened. "People. They're trafficking people." Martha's blood ran cold. "What kind of workers for the mines? Except they're not planning to pay them. Bring them in. Claim they owe for transport. Keep them in debt forever." He stroked Sarah's hair absently, still processing her presence. "But that's not the worst part." "Tell us," Eleanor demanded. "They mentioned taking local women too. Widows, orphans, anyone without protection. Ship them to mining camps up north where law doesn't reach." Martha thought of the orphanage. All those vulnerable girls. "When?" "Soon. They're waiting for someone from Denver, a money man who'll finance the operation." Ethan's eyes found Martha's. "Someone named Reed Montgomery." The ledger in Martha's room suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Reed here, following the trail of his lost evidence, or just expanding his web of corruption. "We need Sheriff Davis," Eleanor said. "Davis won't move without proof. Blackwood owns half his salary." Ethan shifted, and Sarah made a small sound. For the first time, he truly looked at her, taking in the changes 10 years had wrought. "God, Sarah, you're so grown." "I wanted to come back," she whispered. "Every day. But Miss Eleanor said..." "She kept you safe." His voice was rough. "That's all that matters." Movement below caught their attention. The cabin door opened, and lamplight spilled out. 3 women stumbled into view, hands bound. Jenkins prodding them with his rifle, even from distance. Martha could see their terror. "No!" The word escaped before she could stop it. One woman fell to her knees. Jenkins grabbed her arm, yanking her up. In the lamplight, her face was young, terrified. She couldn't be more than 16. Ethan's hand found Martha's, squeezing hard. "We can't take 6 armed men." "We can't leave them," Sarah said fiercely. "We get help," Eleanor decided. "Ride back, raise a posse." A scream cut through the night. One of the women had broken free, running for the tree line. A man Martha didn't recognize caught her easily, dragging her back by her hair. "That's Mary Hutchinson," Eleanor breathed. "She went missing from Gold Hill last week." They watched, helpless, as the women were herded back inside. Ethan's hand trembled in Martha's grip. "I know her too," he said quietly. "She's maybe a year older than Sarah." That decided it. Martha pulled free and started down the slope. "Martha, no." Ethan grabbed for her but missed. She was halfway to the cabin before logic caught up with passion. What exactly was she planning to knock on the door and demand they release their captives? But her feet kept moving, driven by the memory of that girl's terrified face. A hand clamped over her mouth, dragging her behind a woodpile. Ethan's voice hissed in her ear. "Are you insane?" She twisted free. "We can't just watch. And we can't die uselessly." He gripped her shoulders. "Think. Use that brain I know you have. How do we save them without getting everyone killed?" Martha forced herself to breathe, to plan. "The horses. We could scatter their horses, make it harder to pursue." "Better. But first we get Eleanor and Sarah away." He glanced back at the boulders where they'd left the others. "If shooting starts..." His words cut off as the cabin door opened again. Blackwood emerged with another man, and Martha's heart stopped, even in the dim light. She recognized Reed Montgomery, older, grayer, but unmistakably the man who'd ordered her sister's death. "Everything's arranged," Reed was saying. "The shipment arrives Thursday. 20 workers for the mines, and whatever local stock you've acquired." Stock. The word made Martha see red. "The girls are just the start," Blackwood replied. "That orphanage has another dozen ripe for picking. And there's a new seamstress in town, pretty thing. She'd fetch good money up north." Ethan's hand found hers again, steadying. They crept back to the boulders where Eleanor waited with Sarah. "Reed Montgomery's here," Martha whispered. "He's financing." A twig snapped behind them. They spun to find Jenkins grinning, rifle raised. Well, looks like we got some volunteers for the shipment." Ethan moved faster than Martha could follow, knocking the rifle aside. The two men went down in a tangle of limbs. The gun went off, the sound echoing off mountain walls. "Run!" Ethan shouted, struggling with Jenkins. "Get him out!" But running was pointless now. Men poured from the cabin, guns drawn. Eleanor pushed Sarah behind a boulder as Blackwood's voice rang out. "Westlake should have known you'd turn up, and with ladies, too. How convenient." Ethan managed to throw Jenkins off, but 3 guns were trained on him now. He raised his hand slowly. "Let the women go. Blackwood, your issue's with me." "My issue?" Blackwood laughed. "Boy, you've been an irritation for years, but finding you here with..." His gaze found Sarah, and his smile widened. "My God, the little Westlake girl, not burned to death after all." "Leave her alone." Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. "Oh, I intend to. She'll bring top dollar. Pretty young thing. And those eyes very distinctive." He gestured to his men. "Take them all. We'll sort them with the others." Martha counted options desperately. 6 men, all armed? Their horses were too far, but maybe... "Mr. Montgomery," she called out, stepping into view. "I have something you want." Reed turned, studying her in the lamplight. No recognition flickered in his eyes. He'd never actually seen Elizabeth's sister. "You have nothing I could possibly want. The Morrison ledger. Elizabeth Morrison's records of your Denver operations." She felt Ethan tense beside her. "I know where it is." Reed went very still. "Elizabeth Morrison is dead." "Yes, but her ledger isn't names, dates, every bribe and crooked deal, hidden in Silver Bend." She forced her voice steady. "Let them go, and I'll tell you where. Or I could just torture it out of you." "You could try, but I'm Elizabeth's sister. She taught me well." Martha lifted her chin. "I've already sent letters. If I disappear, the ledger's location goes to federal marshals within a week." A lie. But Reed didn't know that. She saw calculation in his eyes, greed warring with caution. "Interesting." He moved closer. "Show me proof you have it. After they're safe." "No deal." Blackwood cut in. "We take them all. The girl can tell us about the ledger later." Chaos erupted. Ethan lunged for the nearest gun. Eleanor produced a Derringer from somewhere and fired, grazing Blackwood's shoulder. Sarah broke from cover, running not away but toward her brother. "Sarah, no." Everything happened at once. Gunfire, Shouts, the thunder of horses, but not theirs. Martha saw Sheriff Davis and a dozen men charging into the clearing. Saw Jenkins raise his rifle toward Sarah. Saw Ethan throw himself between them. The shot was impossibly loud. Ethan spun and fell, blood blooming across his shirt. Sarah screamed. Martha found herself on her knees beside him, pressing her scarf against the wound. "Got them," Ethan whispered, and she realized he meant the posse. Eleanor must have sent someone before following them. Smart, careful Eleanor. Around them, Davis's men rounded up Blackwood's crew. Reed Montgomery tried to slip away but found himself facing Martha's borrowed pistol.
"For Elizabeth,"
she said quietly, and shot him in the knee. He went down screaming. She kicked his gun away and knelt back beside Ethan, who was trying to sit up despite the blood. "Sarah?" he asked.
"Here."
The girl clutched his hand. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have come back sooner." "Shh, you're here now." He looked between her and Martha.
"Both here. That's good."
Sheriff Davis appeared above them. "Doctor's coming. Hang on. Westlake." As they waited, Martha kept pressure on the wound, her hands red with Ethan's blood. Sarah held his other hand. 10 years of separation ending in violence and reunion. "Martha," Ethan whispered. She leaned close. "Save your strength." "The ledger. Use it. Finish this." "I will." The words came out fierce. "We both will. Together." His hand found hers, sticky with blood, but warm. Alive. In the distance, she could hear the doctor's wagon approaching. Around them, Blackwood's trafficking ring crumbled. The captive women freed. Reed Montgomery whimpering about his knee. Justice was coming to Silver Bend, but first, Ethan had to survive this night. "Stay with me," Martha whispered. "Don't you dare leave now." He squeezed her hand, eyes finding Sarah. "Not going anywhere. Got family to catch up with." The doctor arrived in a rush of movement and sharp orders. As they loaded Ethan onto a wagon, Martha caught Eleanor's eye. "The ledger's under my floorboards," she said quietly. "Make sure it gets to the right people." Eleanor nodded. "And you?" Martha climbed into the wagon beside Ethan, Sarah on his other side. "I'm staying right here." As they rolled toward town, Martha allowed herself one glance back at the cabin. The women who'd been captive stood in a huddle, free but traumatized. Reed Montgomery sat in shackles, his empire crumbling. Blackwood nursed his wounded shoulder and his ruined plans. The mountain had given up its secrets. Now came the harder part, healing what had been broken, reuniting what had been separated, and building something new from the ashes of corruption. Martha pressed harder on Ethan's wound and prayed they'd have the chance. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 6. Town bells and gun smoke at the cabin asterisk, asterisk. Dawn was breaking over Silver Bend as Martha burst through Sheriff Davis's door, her dress still muddy from the night's ride. The ledger clutched against her chest. The sheriff, half-dressed and bleary-eyed, reached for his gun before recognizing her. "Miss Sawyer, what in blazes?" "Blackwood's trafficking women, holding them at his hunting cabin right now." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Ethan Westlake's wounded trying to stop them. They have 3 women captive, maybe more coming." Davis was already reaching for his boots. "How many men?" 6, including Reed Montgomery from Denver. She set the ledger on his desk. "This contains evidence of Montgomery's crimes fraud, bribery, ordering murders. But right now we need to save those women." The sheriff flipped through the ledger, eyes widening. How did you—" "My sister died gathering that evidence. Please, Sheriff, they shot Ethan. His sister Sarah is with him." "Sarah Westlake is dead." "No, she's not. Eleanor Wyatt's been hiding her. Please, there's no time." Davis strapped on his gun belt. "Murphy Harrison, get over here." He turned to Martha. "You did right coming to me. Now go home and—" I'm going with you. Like hell you are. I know exactly where they are. I can identify Montgomery. Martha lifted her chin. And those women need to see a friendly face when you free them. 15 minutes later, a hastily assembled posse thundered out of Silver Bend. Martha rode between Sheriff Davis and Victor Harlow, who'd insisted on joining when he heard the news. Harold Calhoun brought up the rear with several miners who'd answered the call. Always knew Blackwood was crooked, Victor muttered. But trafficking women, that's a hanging offense. They reached the spot where Martha had left the others just as full sunlight hit the mountain. Her heart nearly stopped. Ethan lay against a boulder, his shirt soaked with blood. Sarah pressing Martha's red scarf to his shoulder. Eleanor stood guard with her derringer. "Thank God," Eleanor breathed. "He's losing too much blood." "Doctors coming behind us," Davis assured her. "Where are they?" "Still in the cabin." Eleanor pointed. "They were arguing when we left. Montgomery wants to move the women immediately. Blackwood wants to wait for dark." "Good. Dissension in the ranks." Davis studied the terrain. "Harrison, take 5 men around the back. Murphy, you're with me on the front. Victor, keep the ladies safe." "I'm going with you," Martha interrupted. "Miss Sawyer, those women don't know you. They've been terrorized. Let me approach first. Tell them help's coming." She met his eyes steadily. "I've risked everything to stop this. Let me finish it." Davis sighed. "You stay behind a cover until I give the word. One wrong move and I'll arrest you myself for interfering." They approached the cabin carefully, using trees and rocks for cover. Through a window, Martha glimpsed movement. One of the captive women pressed against the wall. Jenkins guarding the door. Her stomach turned at their hollow expressions. "Blackwood," Davis called out. "Frank Blackwood, this is Sheriff Davis. You're surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Silence. Then Blackwood's voice, smooth as ever. "Sheriff, what seems to be the trouble?" "You know damn well what the trouble is. Release those women and surrender peacefully." "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. These ladies are my guests. Guests don't usually have rope burns on their wrists." Davis shot back. "You've got 1 minute to comply." The response came in gunfire. Windows shattered as Blackwood's men opened up. Davis's posse returned fire, the morning exploding into chaos. "The women," Martha started forward, but Victor hauled her back. "Not yet, girl, let the men—" A figure broke from the cabin's side door, one of the captives, running blindly. Martha tore free from Victor's grip and sprinted to intercept her. "This way, you're safe now." The woman, barely more than a girl, collapsed into Martha's arms, sobbing. They were going to—" "I know. It's over now." Martha half carried her to cover as bullets whined overhead. "How many more inside?" Two others. Mary and Ruth. Please, they're—" Another figure emerged, this time Jenkins dragging a woman as a shield. Martha recognized Mary Hutchinson from Eleanor's description. "Back off or she dies," Jenkins shouted. Sheriff Davis stepped into view, rifle steady. "Let her go. Jenkins, it's over." "Nothing's over," but his voice cracked with fear. "Blackwood promised." The shot came from behind Jenkins. He pitched forward, releasing Mary, who scrambled away. Through the doorway, Martha saw Sullivan lower a smoking pistol. "I'm surrendering," the telegraph operator called. "Don't shoot, I have information." "Coward!" Blackwood's voice roared from inside. More gunfire erupted. In the chaos, Martha saw her chance. She darted to Mary Hutchinson, pulling the terrified girl to safety. "Where's Ruth?" Still inside, Blackwood has her. Sheriff Davis and his men pressed forward, the return fire from the cabin growing sporadic. Then, sudden silence. "Blackwood," Davis called. "You're out of options." "I've got one left." The front door opened. Blackwood emerged, holding Ruth, a woman in her 30s, tight against him, gun to her temple. "Clear a path to the horses, or—" He never finished. Sarah Westlake, who'd crept around the cabin's far side, threw a rock that struck his gun hand. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the air. Ruth twisted free as Davis's men swarmed Blackwood. "That's for burning our home," Sarah said quietly. The fight went out of the rest. Montgomery tried to crawl away with his wounded knee, but found himself facing Martha again. "Federal marshals will be very interested in you," she told him. "Elizabeth sends her regards." Within minutes, it was over. Blackwood's crew sat in shackles. The 3 captive women huddled together, free but shaken. "Doctor." Peterson's wagon arrived, and he immediately went to work on Ethan. "Bullet went clean through," the doctor announced. "Lucky man. Inch to the right and we'd be planning a funeral." "He'll recover." Sarah hadn't left her brother's side. "With rest and proper care, yes." Martha felt her knees go weak with relief. She found herself sitting on a log, watching the aftermath unfold. Davis's men searched the cabin, finding evidence of the trafficking operation, lists of names, payment records, correspondence with other territories. Eleanor appeared beside her. "You did well." That was brave, running to help those women. "It was necessary." Martha watched Sarah help load Ethan into the doctor's wagon. "Will you tell him the truth now about why you kept them apart?" That's Sarah's story to tell. Eleanor smiled sadly. 10 years of secrets. It'll take time to heal. Victor Harlow approached, leading Martha's horse. "Hell of a thing. Miss Sawyer, you've got sand. I'll give you that." Just doing what was right. Most folks wouldn't have risked it. That ledger. Montgomery, you had personal stakes. Martha nodded. "My sister died for that information, but seeing those women captive, knowing what Blackwood planned..." She shuddered. "Some things are worth any risk." The procession back to Silver Bend was subdued. Ethan dozed in the doctor's wagon, Sarah refusing to leave his side. The freed women rode with Eleanor, who spoke to them in low, comforting tones. Blackwood and his surviving men made the trip in shackles. At the jail, Martha gave her statement to Sheriff Davis, detailing everything from the ledger's contents to the night's events. Sullivan, eager to save his own neck, corroborated much of it and added more names of buyers, routes for moving captives, which officials had been bribed. "This is big," Davis told Martha. "Bigger than just Silver Bend. You've helped break up a territorial ring." Then it was worth it. She left the jail to find a crowd gathered in the street. Word had spread quickly. Some faces showed shock, others satisfaction at seeing Blackwood brought low. Martha pushed through, wanting only to check on Ethan. She found him at Dr. Peterson's house, awake and arguing about staying in bed. Sarah sat beside him, their hands clasped as if making up for 10 years of separation. "You need rest," the doctor insisted. "I need to see." Ethan's eyes found Martha. "You're all right." "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" She moved closer. "You took a bullet." "Worth it." He squeezed Sarah's hand. "Got my sister back." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to tell you. Every day. I wanted to come home. But Miss Eleanor said..." "She kept you safe." Ethan's voice was firm. "That's all that matters. We're together now." Martha felt like an intruder on their reunion. She turned to go, but Ethan called her back. "The ledger. With Sheriff Davis, federal marshals will have it within days. And Montgomery, facing charges for your shooting, the trafficking, and everything in Elizabeth's records." Martha allowed herself a small smile. "He'll hang or spend life in prison." "Good." Ethan's eyes held hers. "Thank you for everything." "I should thank you. Without your help." "We helped each other." His voice softened. "That's what partners do." Partners. The word warmed her more than it should. Martha made herself step back. "Rest now. I'll check on you tomorrow." Outside, she nearly collided with Eleanor. The older woman studied her shrewdly. You care for him. It wasn't a question. Martha didn't deny it. He's a good man, who's been alone too long, as have you. Eleanor touched her shoulder. Don't let fear rob you both of a chance at happiness. He just got his sister back. He doesn't need complications. My dear girl, love isn't a complication. It's a completion. Eleanor smiled. But you'll figure that out. Now come, those freed women need care, and I could use another pair of hands. As they walked toward the orphanage, church bells began to ring. Not the usual call to service, but a celebration. Silver Bend had faced its darkness and won. Martha touched the spot where the ledger had pressed against her chest for so long. Elizabeth's work was done. Justice was coming. And somewhere in the doctor's house, a brother and sister were learning to be family again. The bells rang on. Bronze voices carrying across the valley. Tomorrow there would be trials, testimonies, the slow work of rebuilding trust. But today, 3 women were free. A trafficking ring was broken, and truth had won over power. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 7. Frontier Justice and Healing Waters, asterisk, asterisk. The federal marshal arrived on the Tuesday stage, a lean man named Thomas Garrett who looked like he'd been carved from the same stone as the mountains. Martha watched from the cafe window as he strode into Sheriff Davis's office, leather portfolio under his arm. That's the one who'll take your evidence to Denver, Harold Calhoun said, refilling her coffee. Heard he's incorruptible. Let's hope so. Martha had grown wary of officials who seemed too good to be true. Within hours, Marshal Garrett had commandeered the town hall for depositions. Martha spent most of the day there, recounting everything: Elizabeth's death, the ledger's journey, the night at Blackwood's cabin. The marshal took notes in precise handwriting, asking pointed questions that showed he understood the web of corruption. Your sister was brave, he said when she finished. This ledger will put away 12 men across 3 territories. She paid with her life for that information. Then we'll make certain her sacrifice counts. He sealed the ledger in an evidence pouch. You'll need to testify at the trials. Are you prepared for that? Martha thought of facing Reed Montgomery in court, of reliving Elizabeth's death for strangers. I'm prepared. The next days blurred together. Silver Bend transformed into a legal circus lawyers arriving from Denver, reporters from as far as San Francisco. The town hall hosted preliminary hearings where Sullivan sang like a canary, desperate to reduce his sentence. His testimony revealed the full scope of the trafficking network, reaching into mining camps across Colorado and Wyoming. Martha tried to maintain normalcy, working her shifts at the cafe, but everywhere she went, people stared and whispered. The seamstress who'd brought down Frank Blackwood, the woman who'd shot Reed Montgomery, hero to some, troublemaker to others. Don't let it bother you, Ethan said one evening. He'd insisted on walking her home from the cafe, despite his still healing shoulder. People always talk. Give them a week. They'll find something else to gossip about. It's not the talk that bothers me. Martha pulled her shawl tighter against the evening chill. It's the way some look at me, like I've upset the natural order. You did. Blackwood owned this town for years. Some folks got comfortable with that. He favored his right leg as they climbed the boarding house steps. Change is hard, even when it's good change. Inside, they found Sarah in the common room, teaching some of the younger boarders a card game. The girl had moved into the boarding house temporarily, taking the room Drake had vacated. Watching the siblings navigate their reunion had become Martha's quiet joy, the careful way they relearned each other. The moments of startled recognition, the gradual easing of 10 years' separation. Martha, Sarah looked up with a smile. Will you join us? Another time. I have letters to write. It wasn't quite a lie. The marshal had requested written statements about specific dates mentioned in the ledger. In her room, Martha lit the lamp and pulled out paper, but her mind wouldn't focus. Through the wall, she heard Ethan moving about, the scrape of his chair, the soft murmur as he talked with Sarah, normal sounds that had become precious. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Ethan holding 2 cups of tea. Figured you could use this. Writing about hard things goes easier with something warm. She accepted the cup gratefully. How did you know? You get a certain look when you're thinking about your sister. Same look I had for 10 years thinking about Sarah. He leaned against the doorframe. Difference is you're getting justice for your loss. Elizabeth deserved better than justice after the fact. Most people deserve better than what they get. Question is what we do with what's left. He studied her face. You're planning to leave after the trials. It wasn't a question. Martha looked away.
My work here is almost done.
Is it? He set down his cup and crossed to where she stood by the window. Martha, I need to say something, and I'm no good with pretty words, so I'll just say it straight. These past weeks, working with you, watching you fight for what's right, it's reminded me why life's worth living. Her breath caught. Ethan? Let me finish. I know you've got no reason to stay. Know you've probably got plans that don't include a broken-down cowboy and his complicated family. But I'm asking anyway. Stay. Martha made herself meet his eyes. It's not that simple. When the trials end, when the reporters leave, I'll still be the woman who upset everything. Some folks won't forgive that. Then they're fools. His hand found hers, calloused and warm. Martha, I've spent 10 years just existing, going through motions. Then you stumbled into that hallway, all fire and determination despite being swindled and half drowned. And suddenly I remembered what hoping felt like. You had Sarah to hope for. I thought she was dead, gave up hope of family, of anything beyond work and solitude. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You changed that, not just by helping find Sarah, but by being you. Stubborn, brave, kind enough to leave bread for a harsh neighbor who couldn't even thank you proper. You left bread for me, Martha protested. After you showed me it was possible, that small kindnesses still mattered. He cupped her face gently. I'm not asking for promises, just asking for a chance, to court you proper, to build something real. Martha's carefully constructed walls crumbled.
I'm scared. Everyone I've cared about.
I know, but being scared together beats being scared alone. She leaned into his touch, allowing herself this moment of possibility. The trials could take months. Then I've got months to convince you Silver Bend's worth calling home. A throat cleared in the doorway. Sarah stood there, grinning. Finally, I was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in a room. Sarah, Ethan's face flushed. What, it's been painful watching you dance around each other. She looked at Martha. He's been fixing that stuck door every night. Breaks it again each morning so he has an excuse to come over. I have not. Ethan stopped. Caught. Maybe once or twice. Martha laughed, surprising herself. When had she last laughed freely? All this time I thought it was the wood swelling. Oh, he definitely made sure of that. Man's not subtle. Sarah's expression grew serious. Martha, I know we haven't known each other long, but you saved my brother, helped reunite us. If you're worried about fitting in with our odd little family, don't be. You already do. Tears pricked Martha's eyes. Family, the word she'd avoided since Elizabeth's death. Over the following weeks, the trials began in earnest. The circuit judge arrived a stern woman named Patricia Hawthorne, who took no nonsense from anyone. Martha testified for 2 full days, her voice steady as she recounted Elizabeth's investigation, the attack on the stagecoach, finding refuge in Silver Bend. Reed Montgomery tried to paint her as a vengeful sister twisting facts, but the ledger spoke louder than his protests. Line by line, transaction by transaction, Elizabeth had documented his crimes. When Sullivan testified about the telegraph messages ordering the stagecoach attack, Montgomery's face went gray. The trafficking trials were harder. Mary Hutchinson and the other women testified behind screens, their voices breaking as they described their captivity. Martha held Eleanor's hand through it all, drawing strength from the older woman's steady presence. Blackwood maintained his innocence until the end, claiming the women had come willingly. But when Jenkins broke down and confessed everything, the kidnappings, the plans for the orphanage, the buyers waiting in northern mining camps, even Blackwood's expensive lawyers couldn't save him. Guilty on all counts, Judge Hawthorne announced, "Frank Blackwood, you are sentenced to hang. Reed Montgomery, life imprisonment with hard labor. Jenkins, 20 years. Sullivan, 10 years with possibility of parole in 7. The courtroom erupted. Martha felt Ethan's hand find hers, anchoring her through the chaos. It was over. Elizabeth's work was complete. That evening, Silver Bend celebrated quietly. The saloons did good business, but there was no rowdiness. Too much had been exposed for simple celebration. At the orphanage, Eleanor organized a dinner for the women who'd testified, a chance to begin healing together. "What will you do now?" Eleanor asked Martha as they served soup.
I haven't decided.
Martha glanced at Ethan, who was teaching some of the older boys to whittle.
There are reasons to stay.
Eleanor smiled knowingly. "Indeed there are. You know, the orphanage could use someone with your skills, teaching the girls to sew, to cook, to stand up for themselves. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a purpose. The trials may be over, but the work of rebuilding lives has just begun." Martha watched Sarah helping with the younger children, saw how naturally she'd stepped into a caretaking role. The girl had lost 10 years, but hadn't lost her generous heart. If Sarah could rebuild after such loss, perhaps Martha could too. "I'll think about it," she promised. Later, Ethan walked her back to the boarding house along the creek path. The water ran clear after recent rains, washing away the autumn debris. He'd been quiet through dinner, and Martha could feel questions building in him. "Ask," she said finally. "The marshal said you're free to go once you sign the final depositions. Said you might have property coming from Montgomery's seized assets. Blood money. Justice money. Your sister earned it." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Question is, what will you do with it?" Martha had been thinking about that. The orphanage needs funds. The women who were trafficked need help starting over. Maybe I could... She paused, gathering courage. "Maybe I could help manage it. Make sure the money goes where it's needed." From Silver Bend.
If they'll have me.
His smile was answer enough. As they resumed walking, Martha felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the grief she'd carried since Elizabeth's death. Not forgetting, never that, but perhaps, finally, beginning to heal. "I should warn you," Ethan said as they reached the boarding house. "Sarah's already planning the wedding." "Whose wedding?" "Ours, apparently. She's decided we're too old to waste time with long courtships." Martha laughed.
We haven't even...
She stopped as he pulled her into the shadows beside the porch.
Haven't we?
His kiss was gentle but certain, tasting of hope and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, Martha was breathless.
Sarah might have a point about not wasting time.
"Wise girl. My sister." He traced her cheek with one finger. "Takes after her future sister-in-law." Inside, Sarah was indeed sketching something that looked suspiciously like a dress design. She looked up innocently as they entered.
"Oh, good.
You're back, Martha. What are your thoughts on spring weddings?"
Sarah,"
Ethan groaned. "What someone has to plan these things." She winked at Martha. "Welcome to the family. We're all a little odd, but we're loyal." As Martha climbed to her room, the door opening smoothly, now that Ethan had fixed it properly, she felt Elizabeth's presence like a gentle blessing. Justice had been served. The guilty would pay, and life, stubborn and insistent, was demanding she live it. Tomorrow she'd sign the final papers. Next week, Blackwood would hang, but tonight she had tea brewing, a letter to write to Eleanor accepting her offer, and the sound of the Westlake siblings talking quietly downstairs. It wasn't the life she'd planned when she fled Denver with a stolen ledger. It was better. It was real. It was hers. Asterisk, asterisk. Part C8. The Small Hotel and Starlit Sky asterisk, asterisk. Spring arrived early in Silver Bend that year, melting the mountain snow into rushing streams that sang of new beginnings. Martha stood on the porch of the Mountain View Cafe, her cafe now, as Harold Calhoun had decided to try his luck in the California goldfields, selling her the business for a fair price. Martha's Kitchen, the new sign read, painted in cheerful blue by Sarah's steady hand. It wasn't just a cafe anymore, but a gathering place where miners could get honest meals and traveling families could find comfort. "You're wool gathering again," Sophia Warner said, joining her outside. The seamstress had become a dear friend over the winter months, their shared skills with needle and thread bonding them. "Planning," Martha corrected. "The old Henderson place next door is for sale, with the money from Reed Montgomery's assets finally released." "You're thinking of expanding?" Sophia's eyes lit up.
A boarding house. A proper inn, small but welcoming. Clean rooms, good food, fair prices. Martha gestured at the steady stream of newcomers passing on the street. "The railroad's coming through next year. Silver Bend will grow, and it'll need places for decent folk to stay."
"And staff for such a place." Martha smiled. "Eleanor's been training some of the older orphanage girls in housekeeping. Mary Hutchinson's recovered enough to help with cooking. Ruth wants to manage the front desk. She's got a head for figures. Giving them purpose along with work." Sophia nodded approval.
"That's like you."
Through the cafe window, Martha could see Sarah serving customers with easy grace. The girl had blossomed over the winter, growing into her role as both Ethan's sister and Martha's assistant. At 17, she had her mother's beauty and her brother's steel spine. "Speaking of purpose," Sophia continued slyly, "when are you going to let that man of yours make an honest woman of you?" Martha laughed. "Ethan's been patient. He knows I needed time to build something of my own first. And now. Martha touched the simple gold band she wore on a chain around her neck, Elizabeth's ring, which she'd retrieved from Montgomery's confiscated belongings. "Now I think I'm ready to build something together." That evening, she found Ethan at their usual spot by the creek, skipping stones across the water. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a faint scar to remind them of that violent night. He worked full-time at Silverhorn Ranch now as foreman, the owners having recognized his worth after Blackwood's fall. "Sarah says you're buying the Henderson place," he said without turning. "News travels fast. Always does when my sister's involved." He faced her, expression serious. "It's a good investment. Smart business. But just wondering if you've thought about where you'll live once it's running." Martha moved closer, reading the uncertainty in his eyes.
"I thought the owner's quarters would suit, unless..."
She took a breath.
"Unless I had a better offer.
A permanent room, maybe somewhere with doors that don't stick." His face transformed with one of those rare, full smiles that made him look years younger. "Martha Sawyer, are you proposing to me?"
"Someone has to. Sarah's been designing wedding dresses for 6 months. Actually,"
he reached into his pocket, "I was planning something a bit more traditional." The ring was simple, a small sapphire surrounded by silver. Nothing fancy, but perfect in its honest beauty. Martha stared at it, then at him. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "Been carrying it for weeks, trying to find the right moment. But you always were one to upset the natural order." "Is that a complaint?" "Never." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "Marry me. Martha, let me wake up every morning knowing you're safe, knowing you're mine. Let me help you build that in. Raise children who'll never doubt they're loved. Grow old arguing about whether doors should stick or not."
"Yes?"
The word came out sure and strong.
"Yes to all of it."
He kissed her there by the creek,
with the spring evening falling soft around them and the water singing over stones. When they finally parted, both breathless, he kept her hand in his.
Sarah's going to be insufferable.
She's earned it.
Martha leaned against his shoulder.
Should we tell her tonight?
She probably already knows. Girls got a sixth sense about these things. They walked back to town as the first stars appeared. The boarding house was lit up warm, voices and laughter spilling from the common room. Inside, they found a celebration already in progress.
Finally, Sarah rushed to hug them both.
I was starting to think I'd have to propose for you both. Eleanor raised a glass of cider. To Martha and Ethan, may your union be as strong as your courage and as lasting as these mountains. The wedding took place 3 weeks later on a perfect May morning. Martha wore the dress Sarah had designed, elegant in its simplicity, with touches of lace at the collar and cuffs. Ethan waited at the altar in his best suit, looking nervous until she appeared. Half of Silver Bend crowded into the church. Sheriff Davis stood as Ethan's best man, while Eleanor and Sophia flanked Martha. The orphanage children scattered flower petals with enthusiasm, and Judge Hawthorne herself presided, having delayed her circuit to attend. Do you, Martha, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Judge Hawthorne asked. Martha looked at Ethan scarred, steady, hers, and thought of all the paths that had led her here. Elizabeth's sacrifice, the ledger's weight, cold creek water and broken bridges, bread left in darkness and scarves bright as courage. I do. Do you, Ethan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? His voice was rough with emotion. I do, always. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Martha's kitchen provided the feast beef stew and fresh bread, pies of every variety, and a wedding cake decorated by the orphanage girls. Musicians played, couples danced, and for one golden day, Silver Bend forgot its harsh edges. As twilight fell, Martha stepped outside for air and found Eleanor on the porch. No regrets? The older woman asked. None. You. Eleanor smiled. My only regret was keeping them apart so long. But you've healed that wound. Both of them are whole now, because of you. We healed each other. Martha watched through the window as Ethan danced with Sarah, brother and sister laughing. That's what family does. The Henderson Place purchase was finalized the next week. Martha threw herself into renovations, transforming the run-down building into the Westlake Inn 8 rooms, each clean and welcoming. Mary Hutchinson proved a talented cook, while Ruth managed the books with quiet efficiency. 3 other women from the trafficking rescue found work there, building new lives from the ashes of trauma. The railroad arrived ahead of schedule, bringing prosperity and complications in equal measure. Silver Bend grew, sometimes painfully, but the foundations laid in justice held strong. New businesses opened, including a proper school where Sarah began teaching the younger children. One evening in late summer, Martha stood on the inn's upper balcony, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Ethan joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. A busy day. Full house, a traveling theatrical troupe, 2 mining engineers, and a family heading to California. She leaned into his warmth. Good busy. Sarah asked if she could have the teaching job permanent-like. Says the hotel work is too tame. Martha smiled. She's got your restless spirit. Teaching suits her. Speaking of suited, he turned her to face him. Eleanor cornered me today. Said you've been feeling poorly in the mornings. Eleanor needs to mind her own business. Is she wrong? Martha met his eyes, seeing hope there mixed with concern. No, she's not wrong. His hands went to her still flat stomach. Reverent. When? Winter. The doctor thinks late January, maybe February. A baby. Wonder filled his voice. Our baby. Scared. Terrified. he admitted. But the good kind, the kind that means something matters. They stood together as stars emerged, one by one, in the darkening sky. Below them, Silver Bend settled into evening lights in windows, families gathering for supper, the orphanage bell ringing to call children home. It wasn't perfect. No place ever was. But it was theirs, built on truth and courage and the small kindnesses that held communities together.
Elizabeth would have loved this, Martha said quietly. Seeing justice done, watching something good grow from the pain.
She knows, Ethan said, somehow.
I think she knows.
A door opened below, and Sarah's voice called up,
"Are you two going to stay up there all night or come down and help with these dishes?"
"Coming," Martha called back. Then to Ethan, "Ready for this, all of it. The inn, the baby, Sarah's managing, the whole glorious mess." He kissed her, soft and sure.
"Been ready since you stumbled into that hallway? Just took me a while to admit it."
Hand in hand, they went downstairs to their family, their work, their life, outside. The mountains stood eternal guard while the creek sang its endless song. And somewhere in the star-drunk sky, Martha felt Elizabeth's blessing settle over them all like a benediction. The seamstress who'd arrived seeking work had found so much more. The harsh cowboy next door had become her heart's home, and Silver Bend itself had proven that even in the roughest ground, justice and love could take root and flourish. The story that began with a broken bridge had built something stronger, a future bright with promise, a family forged in trial, and a love that would weather whatever storms might come. In the morning, there would be guests to tend, meals to cook, children to teach, and lives to build. But tonight, there was laughter and dishes and Sarah's terrible singing and Ethan's steady presence and the quiet joy of belonging. It was enough. It was everything. It was home. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale. Please share in the comments below where you're listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts together. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night and like this video. Your support by hitting the hype button helps this story reach more listeners who love tales of the American frontier. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community.